Greetings from the kitchen. Have you ever thought about the difference between being handed something instead of taking it yourself? Lately, I've been buying my food from the fish and meat counters at my local grocery stores. And yesterday, I received this package of fresh fish. And like always, I was happy like a child. And then I started thinking about how different it feels to being handed your package of fresh food instead of just picking a vacuum packaged fish from the shelf that has been sitting there for a while. And this human interaction, this brief moment that you have with the person behind the counter is a reminder of our interconnection with everything. It feels so different to being handed that food instead of taking it yourself, because it reminds you that in order to sustain your life, yourself, your body, your spirit, you need to feed. You need to receive life force from somewhere. And as a fact, we cannot create life force. We cannot create food. We can only take what is there, grow it, and shape it, but we can never actually create real life force. I also remember very much my childhood. I grew up in Germany, and meals would always be served by my mother and grandmother. We would never take our food ourselves. So mother and grandmother would give everyone their portion. That was, of course, for practical reasons, because that way you can make sure that food is enough for everybody. But it's also a beautiful habit because it makes you understand that food comes from somewhere and it has to be given to you. You can only receive it. You can never create it entirely yourself. And also, our modern lifestyle is so, well, in a way, it has made survival so much easy that we don't think about it anymore. We don't think about the cycle of life. We don't think about the principle that is at the very core of life on planet Earth. So we just go into a grocery store, we buy our things, and we just eat. That's it. The generations that were living way back in history, they were very much aware of the cycle of life because they were so part of nature. They were so out there in nature and not living like we do. They didn't have grocery stores. They had to actively hunt their food. So they were very aware of what it means to be alive on planet Earth and what life actually is. We are not so much aware of that anymore. But still, when you are at the counter and someone hands you that package of fish or meat, it makes you very humble because you understand that you feed on life force. By the way, that's also the same if you eat plants. I made a video, the last video actually, about that. But okay, moving on. Also, it makes you think about how nourishing the food that you eat actually is. Is that what you eat full of the building blocks of life? Or is it just something that you put into yourself that keeps you full for the next 2-3 hours and then you're hungry again, and without the actual nutrients that you need to sustain your body healthy? Our modern food industry has made possible that we can consume things that are actually not healthy, that do not sustain the body functions as they are supposed to work. Also, what happens with our mind? That's a really huge topic. But the core idea of you being part of this cycle of life, you taking part in the transmission and transformation of life energy through your body, you take it in and you give it away. It always moves. Life force has to move. you get very aware of that when you go back to what we had not so long time ago, when, you would have a local baker, a local butcher, and you would just get your food there and not packaged, ready, made, lasting for several weeks or months even, taking it from the shelf, but just being handed it down by someone else. That connection, that moment, that tells you that you are on the receiving end. We always receive the life force. We can never create it. We can only receive it and understand it and see it as a gift. And that is possible when you have this human interaction. It's so important, actually. I only now figure out how important that actually is. I still remember my childhood when we would go to the little store near our house with my grandparents, and they had milk there and sugar and meat and whatever, and you would just say what you wanted, and they would pack it for you in paper and jars and whatever. So they would have scales there, and it was the old way. I always liked that. So I still remember that time, and I think these days in my 40s that I really would like to go back to that. I didn't actually miss this when I was younger. I thought it's much easier these days, and how far have we come, and how easy it is to get food everywhere. But nowadays I don't see only the logistics behind buying food and consuming, but I also see the human connection and how important it actually is, because it teaches us about life on this planet, and that in order to live here, we have to receive the life force, and we need to be aware of that, because it makes you humble and it makes you live a very different life compared to if you just consume without the human interaction in between. Yeah, that's the side note from the kitchen. I hope you have a wonderful day, and see you next time. Bye-bye.